Hi there, it's acrylic lesson time, and I'm going to be doing some rocks submerged in water and coming up above the water so that we can see what it's like to paint rocks under the water in acrylics and above the water. I'm going to put in a bit of underpainting for a bit of fun today. I'm using a canvas paper and I'll be using some inks. I have 3 different brands. I'll just be using a mixture of them. I have the Liquitex ink, Amsterdam ink, and Art Spectrum ink. Not necessarily these colours. We'll just get going. How I'm going to start is just by taking my acrylic inks and starting to draw on there some rock shapes. Just drawing in some general shapes of rocks pointing. We're looking down on this pool of rocks. I'm going to run in some other bits of colour, a little bit darker around the rim of them, which is going to be the bit that's underwater. And I don't mind a few drips. We're just going to let those drips take care of themselves. Here we go. If I don't want drips, I'll lay it flat, but I'm just letting the drips create some of the texture in there. And what I can do is just tilt it if I want the drips to go another way, and just encourage them to go slightly another way. I can also just spray a bit of water if I wanted to really help those drips come along. And then you can see I'm just tilting the board around, rotating it around, and that's going to help me with some of the marks in the rocks, the cracks and whatever. Set that back up there. So I'm starting to get those in. These are just some nice earth colours that I'm choosing. So I might then put in some other rock shapes underwater, small ones. Just using my brush in different shapes. These are for smaller submerged rocks. And they kind of sit on top of each other under the water, and they're all sort of different shapes, so just popping those in to start suggesting. Once they're all dry, I'm going to put a little wash over to unite the underwater look. Some of them will be a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger than others. I'm getting them. You can see where it's dripping down, they're getting a naturally darker bottom anyway. I can make this a little bit more interesting by drawing in. So I just take, here I've got a violet, and I'm using the dropper to just draw a few little extra bits and pieces in amongst that. And they can just run and drip as they will to create some extra texture effects in the rocks. These are quite smooth river rocks, so I'm not going overboard with texture in them, but they do have some cracks and little suggestions, and just drawing with the nib, and as you squeeze on it you get more or less ink coming through, which can be interesting as well. I'm now going to take a little bit smaller brush and just go in and make some smaller rocks. If you don't like the brush you picked up, Let's grab another one. I didn't really like that one. Now, this is the one I'm after. And I can do nice small ones here. I can put as many or as little as I like in there. I'm going to put them smaller as I come into the centre, having a lot of sort of, I'm trying to make an interesting composition as well. So here, I'm just going to tidy those edges up a bit. As I come in, I'm going to make it lighter. So we'll have some lighter areas there with smaller pebbles, and then they'll be bigger as I go out there. And as I come in, smaller bits of gravelly bits amongst the larger rocks. Now the acrylic ink is very liquid and transparent. So I'm starting with the transparent layer, and then I can work back into it with the more opaque acrylic body colours, so just the thicker acrylic paint. And then if I want to put any more details in later, a little bit finer, I can go in and use some fluid acrylics, because they're somewhere in between. You can't make fluid acrylics by just watering down body colours. It doesn't work that way because of the way they're made. They've got a really strong pigment load, and the pigment load, once you start watering it down a thicker body colour, you'll start diluting the pigment, whereas the fluid flow acrylics already have a massive amount of pigment in them, and you don't need to dilute them, so you keep that full pigment load, so you get the colour that you're after. Of course, you can really dilute down your body acrylics, heavy body acrylics, and get washes and make washes, and that's fine, as long as you don't expect the colour value to stay the same. It will be diluted. It's the same as if you mix it with white or black, you're making tints and shades, or when you water it down, you're making a less saturated colour. So closer to the rocks, I'm making some larger rocks that are just touching them. And you can see I'm building up a pebble base there with just the little dots and dashes. They're all going to be seen underwater. Now, if I wish to at this stage, I can give them a little bit more variety. I'm just taking some blue and mixing it in with that dark umber that I had. And I'm adding in some little shadow bits underneath those, the edge of the bases of those rocks, little pebbles, the bigger pebbles, the larger rocks. And that little bit of shadow will go around the edge here of these larger rocks as well. Just adding a bit of that in. In fact, add it all in there. So you can be as free as you like at this stage with adding in details. I'm not going too detailed, I'm just being fairly loose with this. And I'm quite liking that it's running a little bit, because this is all going to be underwater, so it won't have as much clarity as the parts that are going to be above water, which will be these lighter tops, which we will be adding body colour to. Quite happy to make all a little bit darker up here in the corners, because I don't want my eye to be dragged out. So just putting in some little shadowy bits here and there, using this little mixture, just a flick of the brush around, just to set up some contrasts underneath the water. Now it depends how still the water is, how clearly we're going to see these rocks and pebbles. I also want to just dash in some really darker rocks and pebbles amongst those. And I'm going for this very dark blue colour, sort of greeny blue. Just randomly dotting them in. And then I mix some of it with a bit of the yellow ochre to produce another colour. I don't know whether I've mentioned it before. I have a bird around here that's just driving me absolutely balmy. It's a beautiful singing bird, and it's a lovely, it's a grey shrike thrush, silver shrike thrush, and it's a lovely song, but it's just gone absolutely ballistic, tapping on the window, really loud. Sometimes it feels like it's got a rock and it's trying to break the window, and after a while it can just do your head in. We're always joking about getting the cat to kill it. And the other day it got inside. My husband picked it up and he said, oh, I was carrying it back outside and his little vulnerable neck was in my hands and I really just wanted to ring it because I can't take the noise anymore. But of course he didn't. And it's still pecking away. It brings little offerings to the window, to the bird it can see in mirrored there. It's bringing it straw to make a nest. It brings it caterpillars and slugs and snails and bashes them against the window to give to it, causing my windows to look absolutely disgusting. And I've just given up cleaning them until it goes away and moves and loses interest, which hopefully will just be another couple of months. It's been going on for months. No wonder I'm being driven crazy. So some of these little marks on the rocks, tops of the rocks, are just getting a little touch up with a different colour. And some of the little rocks underneath can get little marks on them as well. Just some little cracks and markings. And then I'm going to need to let the whole thing dry before I progress any further. If I want to at this stage I could spray it again with water if I was inclined to. To create more interest and texture. There's a good one to experiment with it because rocks can look any way you want them to. So you notice I'm not using a reference photo, I'm just making rounded shapes and then I'm just laying on some little bits of markings and random patterns. And think about how it's going to play with your whole composition. So here I've got the leading edges of these rocks, all sort of pointing in towards that middle section, which is a little bit open, and then we have these rocks, all centering on there. And later on, I might add some little fish in there for a little bit of interest. So it's not so interesting out there. I'm just going to make some of those rocks a little bit bigger. Like I said, I want to keep the main action happening in here. And so when I put in the wash over here, I'm going to make it a little bit darker out towards the edges so that the eye is attracted more in here. just filling some of those gaps in before I do that. Okay. Adding a little bit of shadow around there. That's all going to dry now. Once the ink's dry, they become waterproof, so putting other layers on that have got water in them won't affect them. Once they're dry, I can put a glaze over, and I can use fluid inks. I can use the inks, or I can use the high flow acrylic, or I can water down some acrylics, heavy body acrylics, with some glazing gel, and then paint that over. So I'll just see how I feel once it's dry. Now it's time to go back in with that wash I was speaking of earlier. I've got some yellow ochre, which I'm just brushing over the parts of those rocks that are submerged and all the other little rocks. And the bits that are submerged, just to take the white away. Out in the corners, I've got a little bit of a deeper, darker, greener colour that's going around. That whole rock's going to be submerged. So at the edges, I'm just putting a little bit of a greener colour. I might take it into there as well. Let's see it coming around there. But in the centre area, it's just going to be this. The yellow ochre is not as transparent as some of the other colours. So in the green mix, I have transparent sienna. I don't mind that this is not quite so transparent because it's obscuring a little bit and blurring a little bit the rocks that are under the water and giving them that look. So all these rocks in the middle are underwater. And you can see I'm starting to get more of a watery look there. There. Just mixing a little bit of the green, some of those spots as well. And again, what I need now is to let this dry before we do the next layer. Back again, and this is all dry now, so going back in with this is all dry, and I'm going back in with some lighter colours on these rock areas there. So what's going to happen? What will happen is I'm going to mix up some lighter pastel colours with some toning grey, and I'm going to just make some little lighter areas on top of the rock with the thicker pastel. Sorry, I'm getting my mediums mixed up there with the thicker acrylic paints. I want these to be generally a bit warmer, and I'm happy for some of that to show through there. So I don't want to lose all the stuff I've done with the acrylic inks, and you can see they're showing through there. I can run my finger around there. So what I'm trying to do is just make the top of the rocks now. With something with a little bit more body. So I could keep going with the transparent inks and just glaze if I wanted to, but I'm sort of doing a little bit of a mixed media here with the thinner inks and then the thicker paints. These are more opaque, so they're tending to blur some of the ink work underneath it. If you're really happy with your ink work, then you don't need, you can just keep going with ink. can see I'm making these very light in comparison to the rocks that are under the water. I'm letting some of the patterns show through. And the ink, because I'm not putting this opaque paint on really thickly. If I want to, I can add a little sort of peaky bit on that, which is showing above the water too. If I don't like it, just wet my brush and take it out. You want to put a bit of variation in here. Here I've got some Naples yellows. I'm just going over that tinty mix. And I just keep mixing up slightly different colours. I might make some areas slightly warmer. We're looking down on top of it, so it just depends where we want to have the sun coming through. And I haven't really, sorry, the light direction, I haven't really clearly defined that, but now is the time to do it. So is it coming straight down on top of the rocks, in which case the lightest parts will be there, and as they curve away they'll get a bit darker, and in that case I would just make that top section the lightest, and then it will just tail off as it moves down the side, sort of grading out to warmer. So I could do that, or I could say that the sun is maybe coming from that direction, in which case this area is going to be the lightest, and then as it comes over to this side I could add in a little bit of shadow by putting in a little bit of a blue or a violet into the mix as it curves over the top. Go back in and make that lighter still. So you can see, you can't see a lot of what's going on underneath, but you can see a bit here, you can see a lot more, and here you can see even less. It depends how thickly you put on the acrylic paint, the thicker body paint, and how you work it. Some of them I want to see a little bit more coming through. So I'm just simply building up some little layers there. I'm not going to show the tip of that one, but I am going to show the tip of that one coming through the water. Just so now we can see that the lightest parts are coming through the water. This, I just want to knock that back under the water again, so I'm just putting in a little bit of a darker colour there to put it back underneath the water. Round here I just need to put in a tiny touch of more colour on some of the rocks. And now that's going in with the thicker paint, but not too thick. Just giving it a little bit of this warm colour. That's transparent red oxide. Just adding a little bit of that in to some of them. And then there we go. So we've still got above water, below water. I can keep working with some little changes in colour to help that settle into forms. So I'm going to have the sun coming that way, that way, that way, so it'll hit there, but over here it's going to be more shadowed. So I'll put in some shadowy blue colour, and I'm just making the mix not too thick. I haven't added any mediums in with this, just the straight paint. And then I'm just mixing it in with the still wet layer underneath. And we can come back to that as much as we like, building up layers. Right now I'm just using a circular motion with my brush to blend it over and into the other paint. Still keeping some of that lovely markings that we got earlier with the inks. And you can work those rocks as much as you like to achieve the desired effect. On this one, it's going to be cooler down here on the shadowed side. And warmer up here. On the sunnier side. Need to warm up this side now because I was demonstrating that as if the sun were coming over the top. So we'll warm up that side where the sun's striking it. To ensure that we can see which is wet and which is dry, we just need to put it. Let's get rid of some of this. Now what I want to do is demonstrate how the water is coming up to the edge of that rock there, and then we can see a bit more of the surface of the water. Because you can float things on the surface of the water, or you can just also put the little rim around the edge of the rocks. So here we go, just putting a little bit of a water rim around the edge of the rocks there. And that rim is really the reflected skylight. So light from the sky reflecting off the water as it comes up to the edge of the rocks there. It's a little skip and miss, so you don't put it all the way. You have some bits that really show up and some bits that are just a little touch here and there. And I'm just using a fine rigger brush, so very fine rigger brush to do that. Dipped in a little bit of the glazing medium, just to thin it out slightly so it comes off the brush better. I'm just putting a little wobbly, sometimes thicker, sometimes thinner, line around that edge. You can also get little sparkles on the water, so I can put in a few little sparklies. And you can have ripples as well. The top of that rock just needs to be a little bit. I'm going to put some really just straightforward undiluted white on there as well. If I wanted to, I could texturise that a bit more. And I can also display the surface of the water a little bit more fully by making this a little bit ripply underneath. So, for example, where that rock is, it will get a bit of a ripply effect across it. You can see how I'm just rippling the lines across. Similarly here, let's get some ripples across it. Just a little ripply effect. But I need to do that extending out past the rock, so then you need to start going out where the water is and create the little ripples there as well, and then they flow into the other rocks. They can get fairly tedious fairly quickly if you want to do a quick painting. So what I'm doing is just taking out those ripple marks and doing it a different way. And we've all seen how the sunlight can come through and create those lovely ripples on sand and on rocks and so on underneath the water. So what I'm doing is just creating that effect now. I'm mixing up on the palette some different lemony yellows and some very light yellows so that I can use those to make those little ripples over the rocks. They're very fine and they sort of are very random. So you just have to play around with them. They kind of have a little, almost a little, like where Meccano's join. If you're back in the era that can remember Meccano's. So at little intersections, it's a little bit thicker. And it's just, again, a fairly painstaking, randomised action you're taking to create those little ripples. And that can take you quite some time. You can see what I'm doing. I'm just drawing with a fine brush. I'm trying to show where they're curving around the surface as well. And I'm going to put quite a few of those in, just picking up various different of the little lemony colours and moving the brush so that it's a broken line, so it's not continually thick or thin. It doesn't always catch, because that's a better way of showing it. You can start seeing now the ripples coming in there. And as you continue, you'll get better at it, and they'll go a little bit quicker. You're going up over this rock here. And because you won't get them, where there's dry rock. So that's another way that you can tell where the rock is above water and where it's below, whether you can actually see these little light refractions on the refracting off the bottom of the water. Just vary the colours that you're using and the intensity of them. And so here's, I'm putting in some actual lighter spots. You don't need to do that all over if you're going to have a bit of more movement in some area. So, for example, if I was to put a little fish in here somewhere that's moving its tail, then the water might not have that refraction because it's been broken up. So maybe we'll put a little fish in there. Right now I just keep going down this way and trying to get all those done in a fairly quick manner. So you can use as fine a brush as you like. To create your ripples. Because that's probably a little bit too thick, although that's not too bad. And when I really want them to stand out, I just get a bit of pure lemon, which is a lot lighter than the mix I've made, and just put a few little to lead the eye through where I want it to go. So see, I'm making a path with that now through the once you've got all those ripples in, decide where you want to lead the eye, and then use your lightest colour to take the eye up there. So if I'm putting a fish up there, I want to lead the eye up to that fish. And as I come out to the edges, I'll probably make those not quite so noticeable. And that all helps to break up the forms underneath as well and make them look more like they're underwater. It's a bit like creating a jigsaw puzzle, just little broken lines. You don't get really hung up on the forms of them. Just random little jiggles with your brush. And like whenever you're doing a composition, you want to make the area of interest where your eye's being drawn not at the edge, so I'm making them less defined as I move out towards the edge, more defined in the centre and in those rule of third areas.